The rhythmic hum of a diesel engine, a constant companion, defines the solitary world of long-haul trucking. It is a realm often romanticized, painted with images of boundless freedom, amber sunsets casting long shadows across endless highways, and the quiet dignity of a man or woman conquering vast distances. But beneath this veneer of independence and adventure lies a harsher truth, a relentless grind of deadlines, isolation, and the ever-present gnawing fatigue that blurs the lines between reality and the waking dream. For those who truly live on the asphalt ribbons stretching across continents, the road is more than just a path. It is a living entity, a silent witness to countless untold stories, some of which should never see the light of day. Among the legions of these tireless road warriors, 4 individuals stand out, their lives interwoven not by choice, but by the strange, terrifying events the road saw fit to bestow upon them. First, there was Frank, a seasoned veteran whose eyes held the weary wisdom of 1,000 sunrises and an equal number of lonely nights. His gruff exterior was a shield, protecting a heart that had seen too much and perhaps believed too little. Then came Sarah, younger, sharper, her ambition fueled by a desire to prove herself in a man's world. But beneath her fierce independence, a vulnerability pulsed, a quiet echo of past hurts she thought she had outrun. Across the country, David wrestled with the ghosts of his own making. A quiet man whose truck was less a vehicle and more a sanctuary from the world he felt had betrayed him. Finally, there was Lena, the newest to the calling, her youthful optimism still intact, though slowly eroding with each passing mile, each strange encounter. They were disparate souls, united only by the common thread of their profession and the unseen forces that would soon bind their fates together in a chilling tapestry of the unexplained. The open road, they would all eventually learn, holds secrets far older and more profound than any map could ever chart. It cradles tales of vanished souls, whispers of forgotten tragedies, and echoes of malevolent entities that thrive in the desolate stretches between towns, where streetlights are scarce and human presence is a fleeting anomaly. The sheer scale of the landscape, the monotonous drone of the engine, and the profound isolation often serve as a thin veil, easily pierced by the bizarre, the inexplicable, and the truly terrifying. It is in these moments, when the mind is tired and the defenses are down, that the road truly reveals its other, darker side. One particular evening, under a sky bruised purple with the promise of a storm, an old, weathered trucker named Silas sat hunched over a lukewarm coffee in a roadside diner, his face a roadmap of wrinkles carved by decades of wind and sun. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharp, knowing glint as he watched a young, fresh-faced driver, Lena, excitedly chat about her first cross-country run. He cleared his throat, a raspy sound that cut through the diner's low hum. "You think you know this road, kid?" he began, his voice surprisingly deep. Lena paused, a smile still playing on her lips. "I'm learning, sir." Silas chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No, you ain't. Not really. This road, it ain't just asphalt and lines. It's got teeth. It watches. And out there, beyond the reach of your headlights, in the dark where the towns thin out and the signals die, that's where the real passengers ride. Things that ain't got no business being seen. You just pray they don't decide to hitch a ride in your rig." His words, delivered with solemn conviction, hung heavy in the air, a cryptic warning that would soon resonate with chilling accuracy for Lena and for the others, as the endless road began to embrace them in its terrifying, unseen grip. The stage was set, the curtain drawn back on a world far stranger than any of them could have imagined, a world where the supernatural was not just a story, but a very real, very present danger lurking just beyond the beam of their powerful headlights. The old trucker's words, a chilling premonition, soon found their disturbing echo in the experiences of Driver A, a man named Frank. Frank was a seasoned veteran of the asphalt arteries, his face etched with the weariness of countless miles and a cynicism born from years of navigating the mundane and often frustrating realities of long-haul trucking. He prided himself on his unwavering rationality, his ability to dissect any situation with cold logic, dismissing tales of the supernatural as the fanciful musings of overworked minds or the desperate cries for attention from lonely drivers. His routine was his sanctuary. The rhythmic hum of the engine, the familiar glow of the dashboard lights, the endless ribbon of highway unspooling before him. Every mile was a testament to his control, his mastery over the machine and the road itself. One particularly monotonous night, Frank was pushing his rig through a desolate stretch of highway that snaked through the high desert. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and distant rain, a heavy, oppressive atmosphere that seemed to swallow sound. The sky was an inky canvas, devoid of stars, only broken by the occasional flash of lightning far off on the horizon, hinting at a storm that was slowly but inexorably closing in. Frank, ever the pragmatist, was focused on making good time, his mind already calculating fuel stops and delivery schedules. He scoffed at the idea of ghosts or spirits. The only specters he acknowledged were overdue deadlines and mechanical breakdowns. Then, without warning, the heavens opened. Rain began to lash down, not in gentle drops, but in a torrential downpour that instantly reduced visibility to mere feet. The wipers struggled against the deluge, barely clearing enough of the windshield for Frank to make out the faint glow of his own headlights. It was in this sudden maelstrom, a furious chaos of wind and water, that he saw her. A lone figure, standing by the side of the road, her thumb outstretched. Frank, despite his hardened exterior, had an unwritten code. Never leave someone stranded in a storm like this. He slowed the massive truck, the air brakes hissing, and pulled over a safe distance ahead. As he looked in his side mirror, the figure began to walk towards the truck, a ghostly silhouette against the driving rain. She was young, thin, dressed in what looked like a light summer dress, utterly ill-suited for the tempest raging around her. Her hair, dark and plastered to her face, cascaded down her shoulders. When she finally reached the passenger door, Frank leaned over and pushed it open. She climbed in, shivering violently, water dripping from every inch of her. Her eyes, he noticed, were unusually wide and seemed to hold an ancient sadness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the rain on the cab. "I just need to go a little further up the road, just a few miles." Frank, accustomed to the vagaries of hitchhikers, simply grunted in acknowledgement, his gaze fixed on the treacherous road ahead. The air in the cab, however, felt suddenly heavy, charged with an unsettling stillness that defied the storm outside. He offered her a blanket from the bunk, but she politely declined, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if seeing something beyond the windshield. The conversation, if one could call it that, was sparse. Frank asked her where she was headed, but her answers were vague, evasive. She spoke of a destination that seemed to shift with each murmur, a town that Frank couldn't quite place on his mental map. Her demeanor was unsettling. She didn't seem to shiver from the cold anymore, nor did she make any move to dry herself. The water simply clung to her, glistening unnaturally in the dim dashboard light. He tried to offer her some hot coffee from his thermos, but she simply shook her head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "I'm fine," she said, her voice a soft, dry rasp that seemed to contradict the dampness of her clothes. A few miles passed, the rain showing no signs of abating. Frank glanced over, intending to ask her again about her exact destination, when he realized the seat beside him was empty. His breath caught in his throat. The door was still securely latched, the window closed. There was no way she could have gotten out. He slammed on the brakes, the massive truck skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. He twisted in his seat, his eyes scanning the cab, then the road behind him, then the desolate shoulders. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The rain continued its relentless assault, washing away any trace she might have left. A cold dread, foreign and unwelcome, began to creep into Frank's usually unshakable composure. He was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. He tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation. Had she somehow slipped out without him noticing? Impossible. He had been acutely aware of her presence. Had he imagined her? The thought sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He sat there for a long moment, the only sound the relentless drumming of the rain. Then, as his heart slowly began to return to a more regular rhythm, he noticed something on the passenger seat. A small, water-stained photograph. It depicted a young woman smiling shyly, her eyes strikingly similar to those of the hitchhiker. The picture was old, faded at the edges, the kind of photograph one might find tucked away in an antique shop, a relic from a bygone era. Frank picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly. The image was undeniably of the girl he had just seen. A girl who had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only this haunting, fragile piece of the past. His cynical resolve began to crumble, replaced by a profound, unsettling fear that gnawed at the edges of his carefully constructed reality. The road, it seemed, had teeth after all. The faded photograph became an anchor for Frank's spiraling unease, a tangible piece of evidence against the impossible. He clutched it, staring at the smiling face, the eyes that had met his own just moments before. The rain lashed against the windshield, mirroring the storm brewing within him. His rational mind, honed by decades of navigating treacherous roads and even more treacherous human nature, fought valiantly against the encroaching terror. He told himself it was a trick of the light, a momentary lapse in attention, a bizarre coincidence. Yet the image in his hand, damp and ancient, defied all logical explanation. He drove on, the silence in the cab now oppressive, filled with the phantom echoes of her soft voice. Every shadow seemed to shift, every glint of light on the wet asphalt seemed to hold a fleeting glimpse of her disappearing form. He couldn't shake the image of her, soaked to the bone yet strangely serene, her vague answers and that unsettling, almost knowing smile. Frank, a man who prided himself on his unflappable nature, felt a cold sweat prickle his brow. He was used to the solitude of the road, cherished it even, but this was a different kind of loneliness, one laced with an inexplicable presence. Days blurred into a restless haze. The photograph became his constant companion, tucked into the sun visor, a haunting reminder of the inexplicable. He found himself scrutinizing every old newspaper he came across at truck stops, poring over dusty local histories in small-town libraries, a desperate, almost obsessive quest for answers. His initial disbelief slowly morphed into a desperate search, fueled by a gnawing need to understand what he had witnessed. He asked hushed questions of other truckers, carefully skirting the edges of his experience, trying to gauge their reactions without revealing the full, unsettling truth. Most offered cynical shrugs or crude jokes about road fatigue. A few, older and with more miles under their belts, offered knowing, unsettling glances, but no concrete information. The emotional toll was immense. Frank, usually robust and steady, found himself jumpy, his sleep plagued by vivid, unsettling dreams of rain-soaked roads and vanishing figures. The solitude of his cab, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, trapping him with his thoughts. He ate less, spoke less, his usual gruff exterior cracking under the strain. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a guilt he couldn't quite articulate. Had he missed something? Could he have prevented her vanishing? The questions circled endlessly in his mind, like vultures over a barren landscape. One particularly desolate evening, while fueling up at a forgotten gas station in the middle of nowhere, Frank struck up a conversation with the elderly attendant, a man whose eyes held the weary wisdom of generations spent watching the road. The attendant, noticing Frank's unusually distracted demeanor, offered a sympathetic ear. Hesitantly, Frank pulled out the faded photograph, his fingers still trembling slightly. He showed it to the old man, his voice barely a whisper as he recounted the strange encounter. The attendant's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition passing through them. He took the photograph, his weathered thumb tracing the outline of the girl's face. "Well, I'll be," he murmured, his voice raspy. Haven't seen this face in a long, long time. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the dark highway stretching into the distance. That's Mary Jenkins. Frank's heart pounded against his ribs. Mary Jenkins, he repeated, the name feeling both utterly alien and profoundly familiar. The old man nodded slowly. Disappeared back in '73. Just vanished right off Old Highway 17 not far from here. Young thing, just 19. Folks searched for weeks, months even. Never found a trace, not hide nor hair. Just gone. He handed the photograph back to Frank, his gaze now fixed and solemn. They said she was heading to see her aunt. Walked out into a storm just like the one you described. Never made it. A cold, undeniable certainty settled over Frank. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying precision. The vague destination, the old photograph, the vanishing act. It wasn't a hallucination, not a trick of the mind. He had picked up a ghost. A girl lost to the road almost 50 years ago, still wandering, still searching for that elusive destination. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow, stripping away the last vestiges of his cynical disbelief. The road wasn't just a place of commerce and travel. It was a living, breathing entity, a repository of forgotten souls and unsolved mysteries. Mary Jenkins, forever trapped between worlds, a spectral hitchhiker seeking an end to her endless journey. Frank looked at the photograph again, the shy smile now imbued with a profound, heartbreaking sorrow. He felt an overwhelming empathy for her, a sense of shared fate with this spectral passenger. The road had claimed her, and in a way, it had now claimed a piece of him too. The world, once so predictable and logical, had expanded to encompass something far more ancient and terrifying than he could have ever imagined. He knew, with chilling certainty, his journey had just begun. The spectral encounter had left Frank profoundly shaken, but the road, indifferent to personal torment, continued its relentless call. Further down its winding expanse, another soul navigated its mysteries. Driver B, a younger man named Leo, who approached his long hauls with a spiritual curiosity Frank had long since abandoned. Leo, unlike his jaded predecessor, embraced the unseen, a characteristic that often set him apart from the stoic, pragmatic truckers he encountered. He saw the highway not just as asphalt and endless miles, but as a living artery pulsing with energy, history, and sometimes something far more ethereal. His route often took him through stretches of highway known colloquially as whispering roads, places where local legends spoke of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena. For Leo, these were not deterrents, but rather intriguing invitations to connect with something beyond the mundane. One particular night, as his rig rumbled through a dense, ancient forest in the Pacific Northwest, the air grew heavy with an almost palpable stillness. The towering firs seemed to lean in, their branches weaving a canopy that swallowed the starlight, leaving only the truck's powerful headlights to pierce the gloom. Leo had always felt a unique resonance with this particular stretch, a feeling of being watched, not menacingly, but with an intense, almost sorrowful curiosity. Tonight, however, that familiar sensation intensified. He had just passed a weathered sign marking the boundary of a national park when the first anomaly occurred. A faint, disembodied whisper brushed against his ear, barely audible above the engine's hum. It sounded like a name, indistinct and fragmented, carried on a breeze that somehow failed to stir the leaves outside. Leo's hand instinctively went to the volume dial of his radio, wondering if static was playing tricks, but the music was clear, untainted. He glanced into his rearview mirror, seeing only the endless ribbon of road disappearing behind him. No other vehicles, no passing shadows. He dismissed it as fatigue, a common companion on these solitary journeys. Minutes later, the dashboard lights flickered erratically, dimming and brightening in a syncopated rhythm that felt less like an electrical fault and more like a deliberate pulse. His heart quickened. He tapped the dash, then the wiring, but everything seemed secure. The flickering persisted for a few agonizing seconds before settling back into a steady glow. A chill, unrelated to the outside temperature, snaked up his spine. He reached for his thermos, taking a long swallow of lukewarm coffee, trying to steady his nerves. As the miles wore on, the phenomena escalated. He began to hear what sounded like phantom footsteps shuffling softly on the passenger side floor, a rhythmic, almost hesitant sound like someone trying to move silently. He peered down, his gaze scanning the empty space, but there was nothing. Yet the sound persisted, a subtle, unnerving presence. He felt the distinct impression of weight shifting on the passenger seat, as if an invisible passenger had just settled in beside him. The air in the cab grew noticeably colder, a stark contrast to the warmth generated by the running engine. Leo, despite his openness to the unknown, found himself pushing the limits of his composure. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. He tried to rationalize, to find logical explanations for each occurrence, but the sheer accumulation of strange events defied simple dismissal. It was as if something was actively trying to make its presence known, pushing the boundaries of his perception. He muttered a silent prayer, a habit he often resorted to when the road felt particularly lonely or unsettling. Then, through the crackle of his CB radio, a voice cut through the silence. It was distorted, ethereal, like wind whistling through a broken pane of glass, yet unmistakably articulating his name. "Leo!" It whispered, drawn out and mournful. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. He reached for the microphone, his hand trembling. "Hello? Is anyone there?" he asked, his voice sounding thin and small in the vast, silent cab. There was no reply, only the persistent low hiss of the CB. He checked the channel, then the squelch, but everything was set correctly. No one was transmitting. He was alone, yet he had clearly heard his name, called out with an intimacy that sent a shiver of profound dread through him. The whispering winds had found their voice, and it spoke directly to him, from a place beyond the veil. The chilling utterance of his name, echoing from a source that defied all logic, propelled Leo into an immediate, desperate search for answers. He couldn't shake the sensation that he was being singled out, that this unseen entity had a purpose, a message meant specifically for him. The next rest stop offered a brief reprieve from the road's oppressive solitude, allowing him to pull out his laptop and delve into the regional history, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a frantic energy. He typed in keywords: trucker disappearances, highway accidents, paranormal sightings, focusing on the specific stretch of road where his unnerving experiences had occurred. The results were immediate and disheartening. He quickly stumbled upon articles detailing a tragic incident from nearly 30 years prior. A fellow long-haul trucker, a man named Thomas "Tommy" Miller, had perished in a horrific crash on that very highway. Tommy's rig, overloaded and with faulty brakes, had veered off a treacherous curve, plummeting into a ravine. The initial reports painted a picture of driver error and mechanical failure, but as Leo delved deeper, he found whispers of a darker truth. Tommy had been transporting a highly valuable, untraceable consignment for a shadowy logistics company, pushed to exceed legal weight limits and deadlines. Rumors persisted that the company had deliberately overlooked the rig's maintenance issues, prioritizing profit over safety. Tommy, a dedicated family man struggling with mounting debts, had accepted the high-risk job out of desperation, a decision that ultimately cost him his life. The article spoke of Tommy's ghost, a spectral trucker still roaming that stretch of highway, unable to find peace. Some accounts described his phantom rig, its headlights blazing in the dead of night before vanishing without a trace. Others mentioned a mournful horn blast, a sound that carried no physical source, or even the faint scent of diesel and stale coffee in empty truck stops. Leo felt a profound connection to Tommy's story, a kinship born of shared profession and the inherent dangers of the road. He recognized the insidious pressures that could drive a man to take such risks, the compromises made in the relentless pursuit of a paycheck. The phantom trucker's motivation became sickeningly clear. Tommy wasn't seeking revenge in a malicious sense. He was a restless spirit, perhaps trying to warn others, to prevent another tragedy, or perhaps simply to find someone who would listen to his untold story, to acknowledge the injustice of his early demise. The thought settled heavily in Leo's mind, transforming his fear into a somber sense of responsibility. He felt an inexplicable urge to help, to appease this sorrowful specter. During his next leg of the journey, Leo decided to try and communicate, to offer a measure of peace to the tormented soul. He spoke aloud into the empty cab, his voice low and respectful. "Tommy," he began, the name feeling strangely familiar on his tongue. "I know you're here. I know what happened to you." He recounted the details he had read, acknowledging the betrayal, the company's culpability, the unfairness of it all. He spoke of the road's unforgiving nature, of the countless drivers who faced similar pressures, who were just as vulnerable. He poured out his empathy, his understanding, into the desolate space around him. He even tried a small, symbolic gesture. At a particularly lonely spot near where Tommy's crash had reportedly occurred, Leo pulled over. He lit a single candle, placing it carefully on his dashboard, a silent vigil for a fellow brother of the road. He poured a small amount of his lukewarm coffee onto the asphalt, a trucker's offering, a simple act of remembrance. He hoped it would be enough, that this small acknowledgement would somehow reach the tormented spirit. The act felt both foolish and deeply meaningful. He knew he might be talking to himself, that the phenomena could be a mere figment of his tired imagination. Yet as he drove away, a strange calm settled over the cab. The flickering lights ceased, the phantom footsteps vanished, and the chilling whispers faded into silence. The air, though still cool, no longer carried the oppressive weight of an unseen presence. He felt a sense of quiet understanding, as if a burden had been lifted, not just from Tommy, but from himself too. The emotional burden of carrying another's unfinished business, even a spectral one, had been surprisingly heavy. Leo had felt Tommy's despair, his anger, his yearning for justice. Now, a fragile peace seemed to have descended. The revelation that the phantom trucker had been betrayed by his company, leading to his demise, resonated deeply with Leo. It was a stark reminder of the corporate greed that often preyed upon the working man, twisting lives and leading to tragic ends. Tommy Miller was not just a ghost. He was a symbol of countless drivers pushed to their limits, their lives deemed expendable in the pursuit of profit. Leo continued his journey, but the encounter had changed him. The road, once just a path, now felt like a living entity, a vast repository of untold stories, of lives lost and spirits lingering, waiting for someone to finally listen. The road stretched before drivers see, a ribbon of asphalt unspooling into the inky abyss of night. His name was Marcus, a man whose life revolved around the steady hum of his engine and the faces of his wife and 2 young daughters etched into the corners of his mind. Every mile driven was a mile closer to providing for them, a mile further from the gnawing fear of not being enough. Tonight, however, the loneliness of the isolated wooded highway was beginning to feel less like solitude and more like a prelude to something unsettling. The air itself seemed to thicken, heavy with an unidentifiable anticipation, a subtle shift in the nocturnal symphony that only a long-haul trucker, attuned to the road's every nuance, could detect. He had been driving for hours, the moon a sliver of silver against a velvet sky, the trees on either side of the highway forming an impenetrable wall of darkness. There were no other vehicles, no distant headlights or taillights to break the monotonous solitude. Yet an uncanny sensation began to prickle at the back of his neck, a primal instinct screaming that he was not alone. He dismissed it at first, attributing it to fatigue, the mind playing tricks in the dead of night. He cranked up the radio, seeking solace in the crackling static and a familiar country tune. But the feeling persisted, an unwelcome passenger in his cab. Then he saw them, or rather, he thought he did. A fleeting flicker in his peripheral vision deep within the impenetrable woods that bordered the road. He blinked, rubbing his tired eyes, convinced it was just a trick of the light, the reflection of his own dashboard against the dense foliage. But then it happened again, clearer this time. 2 pinpricks of light, low to the ground, an unnatural, luminous green that seemed to pulse with an inner fire. They were gone as quickly as they appeared, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Marcus's heart gave an involuntary lurch. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. He scanned his mirrors, his eyes darting from side to side, but there was nothing. Only the endless dark highway and the silent, watchful trees. He tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation. An animal, perhaps? A deer, its eyes catching his headlights? But the color, that vivid, unearthly green, was unlike anything he had ever seen in the wild. It felt deliberate, observing. A cold dread began to seep into his bones, a feeling far more profound than mere fatigue or loneliness. He accelerated slightly, wanting to put distance between himself and whatever lurked in the shadows. The truck, a behemoth of steel and diesel, suddenly felt small, vulnerable. The woods, once just a backdrop, now seemed to press in on him, alive with unseen movement. Minutes crawled by, each one feeling like an hour. He tried to focus on the road ahead, on the rhythmic hum of the engine, on anything but the unsettling sensation that had taken root in his mind. But the feeling intensified, a chilling certainty that he was being followed. He glanced into his passenger side mirror, and there they were again. Closer this time. 2 glowing green eyes hovering just at the edge of the tree line, keeping pace with his speeding truck. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at his throat. He stomped on the accelerator, pushing the massive vehicle to its limits. The engine roared in protest, the speedometer needle climbing higher. But still, those eyes remained. They didn't seem to be running. They simply moved, gliding effortlessly through the dense undergrowth, always just out of direct sight, always watching. Marcus's breath hitched. He was no stranger to fear, having faced down blizzards, black ice, and the sheer terror of brake failure on treacherous mountain passes. But this was different. This was an ancient, primal fear, a feeling of being prey, hunted by something that defied explanation. He flicked on his high beams, hoping to illuminate whatever horror pursued him, but the light seemed to be absorbed by the darkness, revealing only the endless trunks of trees. The green eyes, however, seemed unaffected, glowing with an even more intense, malevolent luminescence. He swerved slightly, a desperate, irrational attempt to shake off his unseen pursuer. The trailer swayed precariously, a stark reminder of the danger he was in. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't slow down. He had to escape. He had to get away from those eyes. He knew, with a horrifying certainty, that if he pulled over, if he stopped, he would be lost. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to revel in his terror. It drew closer, its movements becoming bolder. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his hands ached. He could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cool night air. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure, unadulterated fear. He squeezed his eyes shut for a fraction of a second, a desperate plea for it all to be a nightmare. But when he opened them, the green eyes were still there, unwavering, relentless. Then, for a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, it appeared. Not just the eyes, but a glimpse of its form. As he rounded a long, sweeping curve, his side mirror briefly captured a distorted image. It was tall, impossibly slender, its limbs elongated and twisted, a shadowy silhouette against the deeper darkness of the forest. Its head, if it had one, seemed to melt into its shoulders, and those glowing green eyes were set deep within its formless mass. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, a silent, terrifying predator, its gaze fixed solely on him. The image was fleeting, blurred by speed and terror. But it was enough to confirm his worst fears. enough to shatter his composure, enough to imprint itself forever into the darkest corners of his mind. The creature was real, and it was hunting him. The horrifying glimpse of the creature in his mirror ignited a new, more potent wave of panic within Marcus. This wasn't some trick of the light or an overactive imagination fueled by exhaustion. This was real. A tangible, malevolent entity was pursuing him, and the chilling realization brought with it a torrent of images. His wife, her warm smile, his children, their innocent laughter. They were the anchors of his world, the reason he endured the endless, lonely stretches of highway, the long nights away from home. And now, this unholy terror was encroaching upon that sacred space, threatening the very foundations of his existence. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a silent vow forming in his mind. He would not let this thing reach them. He would outrun it, outwit it, or die trying. His mind raced, desperately searching for an escape, a plan, anything to break the relentless pursuit. He knew this stretch of road, every dip and curve, every hidden turnoff. He had driven it countless times, a familiar, mundane rhythm that now felt like a cruel joke. He remembered an old, barely used logging road, a treacherous path that wound deep into the woods, rarely taken by anyone but the most seasoned locals. It was a risk, a huge one. His rig was not built for such terrain, but the alternative, continuing on this highway, perpetually hunted, was unthinkable. With a sudden, violent yank of the wheel, he veered off the main road, tires spitting gravel as the massive truck lurched onto the unpaved track. The change was immediate and jarring. The smooth hum of the highway was replaced by the grinding protest of the suspension, the violent jolts sending tremors through the cab. Branches scraped against the truck's sides, a symphony of distressed metal and snapping wood. He peered into his side mirror, heart pounding, half expecting to see those glowing green eyes emerge from the darkness of the forest. But for a moment, there was only black. Had he lost it? Had he finally shaken off his tormentor? A flicker of hope, fragile and fleeting, sparked within him, but it was quickly extinguished. A guttural growl, low and resonant, vibrated through the very chassis of his truck, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, just beyond the reach of his headlights, a pair of green eyes materialized, closer this time, accompanied by the distinct impression of a looming, shadowy form. It hadn't been deterred by the rough terrain, not in the slightest. In fact, it seemed to be gaining on him, moving with an unnatural ease through the dense undergrowth that would have snagged and crippled any ordinary beast. The creature's relentless pursuit was now laced with an unnerving intelligence, a deliberate, predatory patience that chilled Marcus to the bone. It wasn't just chasing him, it was toying with him, savoring his fear, feeding on his anxiety. Every desperate maneuver he made, every racing thought, every surge of adrenaline seemed to fuel its dark energy. He could almost feel its gaze, a palpable weight pressing down on him, dissecting his terror. It was as if it understood the very essence of his fear, the deep-seated dread of failing his family, of not returning home, of leaving them vulnerable. He remembered hushed conversations at truck stops, old-timers swapping tales of strange encounters in these very woods, whispers of ancient spirits, of forest guardians twisted by time and neglect, of things that should not be disturbed. Local legends spoke of entities that preyed on the sorrow and desperation of those who traversed their territory, drawing strength from human suffering. Was this what he had stumbled upon? An embodiment of the road's curse, a manifestation of the loneliness and fear that clung to these desolate stretches of highway? The logging road grew narrower, more overgrown. He gripped the steering wheel, a desperate mantra forming in his mind. Family, family, family. He needed to survive this. He needed to get back to them. The creature seemed to sense this renewed resolve, this surge of protective instinct. Its movements grew more agitated, its growls deeper, more menacing. It was almost as if it was trying to break him, to shatter his will, to sever that vital connection to his loved ones. It understood the burden he carried, the weight of his responsibilities, and it was using it against him. His breath hitched as he pushed the truck harder, the engine screaming in protest. He knew he couldn't keep this up indefinitely. The truck was taking a beating, and so was he. His mind, once sharp and focused, was fraying at the edges, exhaustion and terror blurring the line between reality and hallucination. He saw movement in his peripheral vision, indistinct shapes darting between the trees, always just out of focus. Were they other creatures? Or was his mind finally succumbing to the pressure, conjuring new horrors from the depths of his fear? He pressed on, the roar of the engine and the thudding of his own heart the only sounds in the suffocating darkness. The creature's eyes, those two malevolent green orbs, remained his constant, terrifying companion. They were a beacon of his doom, a chilling reminder that he was not alone and that his desperate flight was far from over. The road, once his sanctuary, had become his trap, and the creature, an ancient, predatory force, was tightening its grip. He was a meal, a source of fear to be savored, and it was determined to extract every last drop of terror before it consumed him whole. The oppressive weight of the pursuit finally began to recede, not with a sudden break, but a gradual, almost imperceptible fading. Marcus, sweat stinging his eyes, dared a glance in his side mirror. The glowing green orbs were gone. The forest, though still dense and foreboding, no longer pulsed with the immediate threat of a lurking predator. He breathed a shaky sigh of relief, his muscles aching from the sustained tension, his mind reeling from the ordeal. He had escaped, but the encounter had left an indelible mark, a raw, exposed nerve where his sense of security once lay. The road, his trusted companion, had betrayed him, revealing a darkness he never wished to acknowledge. Meanwhile, far removed from Marcus's harrowing escape, a different kind of terror was unfolding for Driver D, a man named Arthur. Arthur was a picture of stoicism, his face weathered by years of sun and wind, his hands calloused from countless hours gripping a steering wheel. He prided himself on his impeccable record, his unwavering reliability, and his ability to handle any cargo, no matter how unusual. That pride, however, was about to be severely tested. He had accepted a last-minute job, a rush delivery with an unusually high payout, the kind that usually came with unspoken caveats. The details were vague: a sealed container, sensitive materials, strict instructions not to open or tamper with it. It was exactly the sort of mysterious job that Arthur, in his younger days, would have approached with a healthy dose of suspicion. But years of grinding routine, coupled with a recent financial strain, had dulled his instincts. The money was too good to refuse. The cargo itself was contained within a plain, unmarked metal crate, securely fastened to his trailer. From the moment he hooked it up, an unsettling sensation began to permeate the cab of his truck. It wasn't a sound, not precisely, but a low, persistent hum that seemed to resonate deep within his bones, a frequency that vibrated through the floorboards and up his spine. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed as the ordinary mechanical symphony of a large rig, but as the miles accumulated, the hum grew more distinct, more insistent. It felt less like a mechanical vibration and more like a living thing, a low guttural growl emanating from the very heart of the container. Then came the visual disturbances. At first, they were fleeting, phantom movements in his peripheral vision, shadows dancing at the edge of his perception. He'd blink, shake his head, attribute them to fatigue or the play of headlights on the dark highway. But they grew more frequent, more vivid. He started seeing faces in the distorted reflections of truck stop windows, grotesque visages that vanished when he focused on them directly. Sleep became a battleground. Even when he managed to drift off, his dreams were plagued by swirling, indecipherable symbols and echoing ancient chants that left him waking in a cold sweat, the persistent hum of the cargo still resounding in his ears. Paranoia began to set in. a creeping dread that coiled around his thoughts. He found himself constantly checking his mirrors, convinced he was being followed, even on empty stretches of road. Every creak and groan of his truck became an ominous warning. He started talking to himself, muttering reassurances, trying to rationalize the irrational. The cargo was doing this to him, he was sure of it. It was subtly, insidiously eroding his sanity, chipping away at the stoic facade he had maintained for decades. The hum was no longer just a vibration. It was a voice, a whispering presence that filled his mind, urging him towards unspoken, unsettling thoughts. One night, driven by a desperate, almost primal urge, Arthur pulled over on a deserted road. He knew he shouldn't, but the compulsion was overwhelming. He had to see what was inside. With trembling hands, he unlatched the back of his trailer and, using his crowbar, pried open the heavy metal crate. A wave of cold, stagnant air rushed out, carrying with it a scent he couldn't quite place. Something ancient, metallic, and vaguely organic. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet cloth, was not a box or a device, but a single oblong stone, obsidian black and utterly featureless, save for one chilling detail. Etched deeply into its smooth surface was a symbol, intricate and alien, a swirling vortex of lines and angles that pulsed with a faint, inner light. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet it resonated with a terrifying familiarity, as if it had always existed in the deepest, darkest corners of his subconscious. The hum intensified, vibrating through the very ground beneath his feet, and as he stared at the symbol, he felt a profound, unsettling connection, a magnetic pull that threatened to unravel his very being. His impeccable record, his stoic demeanor, his grip on reality, all were crumbling under the malevolent influence of the forgotten cargo. Driver D, his name was Arthur, stared at the pulsating symbol, a cold dread seeping into his bones, far deeper than any chill from the stagnant air. The humming intensified, no longer just a sound but a pressure, a physical weight on his mind, pushing against the fragile walls of his sanity. He slammed the crate shut, the metallic clang echoing eerily in the vast solitude of the night. But the image of the symbol was burned into his retinas, flickering behind his eyelids even when they were tightly closed. The feeling of being watched, of being known by something ancient and malevolent, was overwhelming. He scrambled back into his cab, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the once familiar interior now feeling like a coffin on wheels. He drove, not towards his destination, but away. Away from the hum, away from the symbol, away from the insidious whispers that now seemed to emanate directly from the stone, burrowing into his thoughts. His impeccable record, his decades of unwavering professionalism, vanished like smoke in the wind. The only thing that mattered now was understanding what he was carrying, and more importantly, how to be rid of it. His desperate search for information began in the dimly lit, greasy spoon diners and truck stops along his unplanned route. He'd surreptitiously sketched the symbol on napkins, showing it to grizzled old-timers, mechanics, anyone who might have seen something similar. Most dismissed it as a child's doodle or a gang sign. A few offered superstitious warnings, speaking of ancient evils best left undisturbed. But it was an elderly librarian in a dusty, forgotten town, her eyes sharp behind thick spectacles, who finally provided a flicker of recognition. She didn't know the symbol itself, but its style, its intricate, almost organic flow, reminded her of obscure texts she'd encountered, detailing forgotten cults and their esoteric practices. She spoke of a sect, long believed eradicated, that worshipped an entity of primordial darkness, a being said to reside in objects of immense power, influencing minds and twisting destinies. Arthur devoured every book, every faded newspaper clipping she could find for him, his sleep-deprived mind racing. He learned of a small, isolated community nestled deep in a forgotten valley where this cult had once thrived. They practiced rituals involving celestial alignments and blood sacrifices, seeking to channel the entity's power. Their demise, according to the texts, was abrupt and mysterious, leaving behind only ruins and whispers of strange artifacts. The symbol, he discovered, was a key, a conduit meant to focus and amplify the entity's influence. It was a lock and a doorway, both at once. The cargo's true nature began to reveal itself with terrifying clarity. It wasn't just a stone, it was an artifact of immense, malevolent power, a vessel for something unspeakably ancient. The hum was its consciousness, its insidious will, slowly but surely consuming his own. He felt its tendrils reaching into his memories, twisting them, planting seeds of doubt and paranoia. He saw glimpses of its power in the way the lights flickered around him, in the sudden, inexplicable gusts of wind that buffeted his truck, even indoors. The road itself seemed to bend to its will, guiding him, pulling him towards some unknown, terrifying destination. His internal struggle became a constant, agonizing battle. He fought the urge to open the crate again, to gaze upon the symbol, to surrender to the hypnotic pull it exerted. He clenched his jaw, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles were white, trying to assert his own will against the overwhelming psychic assault. He knew, with a horrifying certainty, that he was transporting something that could unleash unimaginable evil upon the world. A force that had been dormant for centuries, now awakened and hungry. The thought of the high-paying job, the money that had seemed so important just days ago, now tasted like ash in his mouth. It was a trap, a lure to ensnare a human pawn. The revelation of the cargo's origin struck him like a physical blow. A tattered newspaper article, yellowed with age, detailed the controversial excavation of an ancient burial site in a remote mountainous region. Archaeologists had unearthed strange carvings, unsettling altars, and most notably, a single obsidian-like stone, unlike any geological formation known to man. The article ended abruptly, mentioning unexplained disappearances among the excavation team and a subsequent, hasty closure of the site, deemed too dangerous for further exploration. The piece of stone he carried, the one pulsing with silent malevolence, had been stolen from that very site, a place steeped in dark history and forgotten horrors. He wasn't just a trucker anymore. He was an unwitting accomplice in a cosmic crime, a courier of chaos. The weight of the cargo, physical and metaphysical, pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit entirely. He had to stop it, whatever the cost. The four truckers, each a solitary vessel navigating the vast, indifferent ocean of asphalt, were unknowingly being drawn into a vortex of their own making. Each at a breaking point, their individual realities, once so distinct, began to fray at the edges, merging into a single, ominous tapestry of dread. The long-haul routes, once familiar paths, now felt like tangled threads, leading them inexorably towards a common, terrifying destination. Driver A, haunted by the spectral image of the vanishing hitchhiker, found himself driving through a dense fog so thick it swallowed his headlights whole. The air grew heavy, pregnant with an unnatural chill. He squinted, his eyes straining against the oppressive whiteout, when a figure materialized directly in his path. It was a woman, her form shimmering, translucent, yet undeniably real. Her eyes, filled with an ancient sorrow, met his. But it wasn't his hitchhiker. It was the young woman from the old photograph, decades older, yet unmistakable. She raised a ghostly hand, pointing towards the mist-shrouded horizon, her lips moving in a silent, urgent plea. A shiver, colder than any winter night, ran down Driver A's spine. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that she was guiding him, or perhaps warning him away from, something unspeakable. Miles away, Driver B, still reeling from the whispers of the phantom trucker, gripped his steering wheel with white knuckles. The CB radio, which had been silent for hours, crackled to life, not with static, but with a guttural, distorted growl that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. He heard his name, twisted and stretched, followed by a chilling, triumphant laugh. His truck's dashboard lights flickered erratically, the odometer spinning backward for a terrifying moment before halting at a sequence of numbers that felt profoundly significant. A date, perhaps. or coordinates. As he glanced at his side mirror, a fleeting image caught his eye. The shimmering outline of a truck, its headlights glowing with an eerie, otherworldly intensity, driving parallel to him, even though the road was single lane. It was the phantom trucker, no longer just a voice, but a spectral presence, and in the passenger seat, he saw the faint, sorrowful face of Driver A's vanishing hitchhiker, her spectral hand extended towards him, a silent plea for help. Their worlds were beginning to collide. Meanwhile, Driver C, tormented by the glowing eyes in the dark, found his route veering sharply off the main highway, guided by an unseen force. The woods on either side grew impossibly dense, the trees like skeletal fingers reaching towards the perpetually overcast sky. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and the chilling sensation of being watched intensified to an unbearable degree. Then, through the gloom, he saw it. Not the familiar pair of glowing eyes, but a multitude of them, hundreds, perhaps thousands, reflecting the faint light from his truck, forming a grotesque, undulating wall of watchful terror. They belonged to no creature he had ever known, their shapes shifting, merging and separating in the periphery of his vision. Panic seized him, his breath catching in his throat, as he realized these were not mere animals. And then, in a horrifying flash, he saw a familiar symbol etched into the bark of a twisted, ancient tree. The same symbol Driver D had described, the one from the mysterious cargo. The creature, or creatures, seemed to be guarding it, or perhaps worshipping it. The road, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a cage, tightening around him. And Driver D, his mind a battlefield against the insidious influence of the ancient artifact, felt an overwhelming pull towards a specific point on his GPS, a location that appeared to be nothing more than a blank spot on the map, a desolate expanse of forgotten land. The hum from his cargo intensified, vibrating through the very chassis of his truck, rattling his bones and echoing within his skull. He fought against it, his willpower slowly eroding, but the force was too strong. He saw visions, not just of the ancient cult, but of the other truckers, their faces contorted in fear, their trucks converging like moths to a malevolent flame. He saw Driver A's spectral woman, Driver B's phantom truck, and Driver C's monstrous eyes, all swirling together, coalescing around a single, pulsating source of darkness. The artifact was not just influencing him, it was orchestrating a grand, terrifying reunion. The road itself seemed to twist and turn, each mile bringing them closer to a central, desolate location that pulsed with an unseen, malevolent energy. The lines on their maps, once straight and predictable, now curved and intersected at this single, forgotten point. The air grew heavy, the sky a bruised purple, and an unsettling silence descended, broken only by the rumble of their engines and the frantic beating of their own hearts. Their individual horrors were no longer isolated incidents. They were threads in a larger, darker tapestry, all being pulled taut towards a single cataclysmic moment. The ultimate confrontation was upon them. Driver A's truck, guided by the spectral hand, emerged from the fog into a clearing. At the same moment, Driver B's rig, propelled by an unseen force, veered off the main road, its tires kicking up dust as it joined the first. Driver C, his breath ragged, burst through the tree line, his headlights illuminating the grotesque wall of eyes that followed him, now a tangible physical manifestation of terror. And finally, Driver D, his face a mask of grim determination and profound fear, drove his cargo-laden truck into the heart of the clearing, the ancient artifact humming with a deafening psychic roar. A maelstrom of terror erupted. The spectral hitchhiker from Driver A's past now stood beside the phantom trucker from Driver B's nightmares, their translucent forms flickering as if powered by the raw fear in the air. The glowing eyes that had pursued Driver C now detached from the trees, swirling into a cyclonic mass of pure, unadulterated dread. And from within Driver D's trailer, the ancient artifact pulsed with an unholy light, projecting shadowy, monstrous forms that writhed and contorted, feeding on the fear, on the despair, on the very life force of the converging truckers. The clearing became a nexus of nightmares, a terrifying intersection where all their individual horrors, all their open road fears, finally converged into a single, overwhelming, soul-shattering climax. The night had just begun. The air crackled with an almost palpable malevolence, a symphony of dread that assaulted every sense. The four truckers, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and grim resolve, found themselves trapped in the eye of a supernatural storm. Driver A, the cynical veteran who had once scoffed at such tales, now gripped his steering wheel, his knuckles white, as the spectral hitchhiker shimmered into a more solid form, her eyes locking onto his with an unsettling emptiness. Beside her, the phantom trucker, a figure of sorrow and rage, loomed over Driver B's rig, his spectral hand reaching for the younger man's throat, a silent scream of injustice echoing through the mind of the spiritual driver. Driver C, the family man, watched in horrified fascination as the cyclonic mass of glowing eyes coalesced into a monstrous, multi-limbed entity, its form shifting and writhing, drawn to his primal fear for his loved ones. And Driver D, the stoic who had unwittingly transported the source of this chaos, felt the ancient artifact's power surge, its dark energy binding them all, twisting their individual nightmares into a collective, inescapable reality. Survival became the only imperative. Driver A, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, instinctively slammed his foot on the accelerator, his truck lurching forward, a desperate attempt to break free from the phantom woman's gaze. The spectral figure phased through his windshield, appearing in the passenger seat, her cold, dead eyes fixed on him. He veered sharply, the massive vehicle groaning in protest, hoping the sudden movement would dislodge the ethereal passenger. It was a futile gesture, but it was action, and in that moment, action was sanity. Meanwhile, Driver B, his spiritual beliefs now put to the ultimate test, tried to communicate with the phantom trucker. He spoke aloud, his voice trembling but clear, offering words of peace, of understanding, of release. "Let go," he pleaded, his gaze fixed on the sorrowful eyes of the spectral figure. "Your debt is not with us. Find your peace." For a fleeting moment, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps just a pause in the relentless torment, crossed the phantom's face. It was a brief reprieve, an unexpected alliance of sorts, as if the ancient spirit understood the sincerity in Driver B's voice, a shared understanding of burden. Driver C, witnessing the escalating horror, knew he had to protect himself, not just for his own sake, but for his family. He reached for the hunting knife he kept under his seat, a last resort against any earthly threat, now a desperate symbol against the unearthly. The multi-limbed creature lunged, its glowing eyes burning into his soul. He swung wildly, the cold steel a pathetic defense against something that defied physical form. Yet, in that moment of pure, unadulterated terror, an unexpected surge of adrenaline, fueled by the image of his wife and children, gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for them. And Driver D, the orchestrator of this nightmare, found himself at the epicenter of the maelstrom. The artifact pulsed with terrifying intensity, its shadowy projections now taking on more defined, grotesque forms, clawing at the air, at his sanity. He knew with a chilling certainty that the only way to stop this was to confront the source. He threw open the back doors of his trailer, revealing the ancient relic, now pulsating with a blinding, malevolent light. He felt an urge, an overriding compulsion to touch it, to merge with its power, to become one with the darkness. But a deeper, more primal instinct, a glimmer of his former stoic self, fought back. He wouldn't succumb. He wouldn't unleash this evil upon the world. With a guttural roar, he reversed his truck, aiming the open trailer directly at the swirling vortex of fear, hoping to somehow contain, or at least redirect, its destructive energy. The convergence of their desperate actions created a momentary chaos, a brief window of opportunity. Driver A, still wrestling with the spectral hitchhiker, saw Driver D's desperate maneuver and understood the unspoken plea. He swerved his truck, using its sheer mass to create a barrier, a shield against the encroaching shadows for Driver C. Driver B, sensing the phantom trucker's momentary hesitation, used the opportunity to accelerate, breaking free from its immediate grasp, driving his rig between Driver C and the monstrous entity, providing a momentary distraction. In that fleeting moment of desperate alliance, a profound choice was made by each of them. Driver A, realizing he couldn't outrun the ghost, chose to confront it, slamming on his brakes, hoping the sudden jolt would disrupt its hold, even if it risked his own life. Driver B, instead of fleeing, chose to stand his ground, continuing his silent plea, believing that understanding, not violence, was the only true weapon against a tormented spirit. Driver C, seeing the brief opening provided by his fellow truckers, chose to fight back with every fiber of his being, his knife a desperate extension of his will to live, to return home. And Driver D, with a final agonizing push of his foot, sent his truck and the terrifying artifact within it hurtling towards the heart of the swirling vortex, a sacrifice of his own sanity and potentially his life to end the nightmare. The impact was deafening, a cacophony of screeching metal, shattering glass, and a psychic scream that tore through the very fabric of reality. A blinding flash of light erupted from the clearing, followed by an unnerving silence. When their eyes adjusted, the maelstrom was gone. The spectral figures, the glowing eyes, the shadowy projections, all vanished. Only the wreckage of Driver D's truck remained, a twisted testament to the horror that had transpired. They survived. But the emotional aftermath was a landscape of raw nerves and lingering trauma. Driver A, slumped over his steering wheel, felt the cold imprint of the spectral hitchhiker's presence long after she was gone, a phantom chill that would forever haunt his nights. Driver B, his hands shaking, whispered prayers of thanks, but the echo of the phantom trucker's anguish resonated deep within his soul, a guilt for a peace he couldn't fully provide. Driver C, clutching his knife, stared at the empty clearing. The image of the monstrous eyes burned into his retina, the fear for his family now a constant gnawing companion. They were forever marked by their experiences. The road, once a symbol of freedom, was now a corridor of unspeakable horrors, a testament to the thin veil between their world and what lay beyond. The sacrifice of Driver D, whose fate remained ambiguous amidst the wreckage, hung heavy in the air, a profound loss that underscored the terrible price of their survival. They had escaped, but the battle had left an indelible scar on their psyches, a chilling reminder that some roads lead not to destinations, but to the darkest corners of the soul. The truckers' lives, irrevocably altered by their harrowing encounters, settled into a new, unsettling rhythm. The hum of the engine, once a comforting lullaby, now often brought forth echoes of phantom whispers or the glint of unseen eyes. Their attempts to cope with the trauma and integrate back into society proved to be a solitary battle, fought on endless stretches of highway and in the quiet desperation of desolate truck stops. They were survivors, yes, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the lingering questions and unspoken horrors they carried within their very bones. Driver A, the cynical veteran, found the silence in his cab unbearable. He tried to fill it with talk radio, then classic rock, then anything that could drown out the spectral memory of the vanishing hitchhiker. He drove faster, pushing his rig to its limits, as if speed could outrun the chilling sensation that she still occupied the passenger seat, a phantom weight beside him. He never picked up another hitchhiker, not once. Every shadow by the roadside became a potential apparition, every sudden gust of wind a ghostly sigh. He started taking different routes, avoiding the stretch of highway where it all began, but the road, as he now knew, was a tapestry of such dark corners. His cynicism had not vanished, it had simply reshaped itself, now focused on the terrifying unknown, a constant, gnawing awareness that the world held more than logic could ever explain. He aged visibly, the lines on his face deepening not just from sun and road, but from the invisible burdens he now shouldered. Driver B, the spiritual one, sought solace in his faith with renewed fervor, yet even his prayers were tinged with the phantom trucker's sorrow. He lit candles in roadside chapels, offered silent blessings, and spoke in hushed tones about the peace he hoped the tormented spirit had finally found. But the echo of that desperate, disembodied voice on his CB radio never truly faded. He began leaving small offerings at crossroads known for accidents, a quiet ritual of respect for those lost on the asphalt, a desperate attempt to atone for the peace he couldn't fully deliver to his spectral companion. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a weight that pressed down on him, even as he tried to spread kindness and understanding wherever his wheels took him. The road, for him, became a sacred yet perilous path, where the veil between worlds felt thinner than ever before. Driver C, the family man, returned home to the embrace of his wife and children, but the warmth of their love could not fully melt the ice that had formed around his heart. He saw the monstrous eyes in the dark corners of his bedroom, heard the relentless pursuit in the innocent squeak of a floorboard. His sleep was plagued by nightmares, vivid and terrifying, forcing him to relive the chase, to feel the primal fear for his family's safety. He quit his long-haul job, unable to face the open road again, taking a local delivery route instead, a decision that brought financial strain but offered a fragile sense of security. He became hyper-vigilant, always scanning the shadows, always listening, convinced that the creature, or something like it, could follow him home. His family noticed the change, the haunted look in his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden noises, but he could never bring himself to tell them the full truth, protecting them from a horror he himself barely survived. And Driver D. His fate remained a chilling enigma. The wreckage of his truck had been found, twisted and scattered, but his body was never recovered. Some said he was vaporized in the explosion. Others whispered of a more sinister disappearance, swallowed by the very evil he sought to destroy. The authorities, baffled by the sheer destruction and the lack of a body, eventually closed the case, filing it under unexplained. But the other truckers knew. They knew the sacrifice he had made, a silent, desperate act to save them all from the ancient evil contained within that mysterious cargo. His name became a whispered legend among the long-haul community, a cautionary tale of the price of survival, a reminder that some debts could only be paid with one's very existence. The lingering questions, the unspoken horrors, they were the true cost of the open road. The 4 truckers, or the 3 who remained, were living testaments to the hidden dangers that lurked just beyond the reach of their headlights. Their stories, shared in hushed tones in dimly lit diners, became part of the vast, terrifying unknown that defined the long-haul life. These were just a few among many, they knew, mere glimpses into the abyss that the road, in its endless, indifferent embrace, sometimes revealed. A lone semi-truck, its chrome glinting under the setting sun, rumbled down a seemingly endless highway. The driver, a silhouette against the vibrant sky, was just another soul navigating the vast American landscape. The road stretched out before him, inviting and treacherous, a ribbon of asphalt leading into the unknown. The distant horizon promised another day, another town, another delivery. But beneath the monotonous hum of the tires, a chilling sense of unease settled, a silent whisper in the wind that implied the road always claimed its due, one way or another. The journey was unending, and so too were the secrets it held,